First, let me tell you who I am, and I'm going to give you just a few minutes in that process to help you eat your pizza, because in a minute you're going to need to get up, and you'll have to leave your pizza on your chair. I wasn't counting on you to have pizza in your hand at this exact moment, but I promise no one's going to eat it, okay? You'll be able to get right back to it again. We're just going to do something for a couple minutes. So who am I? I'm an Enterprise Agile Coach. I like to put Performance Coach because people don't know what the hell Enterprise Agile Coach means oftentimes. I have a little bit of an elevator pitch. When people ask me what I do for a living, I usually tell them I just like making people want to come to work. I try to help companies create environments that people want to work at. Okay? Now, every company in the world, no matter what you say and no matter what you read in Jeff Sutherland's book, is struggling to implement Agile the way it was designed. And the bigger the company, the more likely that is to be a problem. Okay? So I don't want to pop any bubbles for you, but if you think you're going to find a large company to work at that is doing Agile perfectly, let me just get rid of that for you. That is not a reality, but it is a journey, and companies are getting better and better at it. And as some of these people who got their MBAs in 1950 are starting to leave the workforce, I'm not trying to turn this into a generational thing, but leadership style is a generational thing. I'm actually one of the people from that generation, so I'm criticizing myself here. But I happen to wake up to what needs to change, and that's what I'm trying to do is coach those leaders to think differently about the way they do work. Okay, so I'm not here representing Nike. I know I am an employee of Nike, but I just want you guys, I have to give the standard disclaimer that everything I say here is my own views. I'm not here representing Nike's views about Agile or Scrum. Thank God. You probably would rather hear mine. Okay, so we're going to do something really quick. It's just going to get the blood flowing, but I promise it's not just one of these weird things that people do at the beginning. I actually have a reason for doing this. So if I could get everybody to just get into a single file line at that post right there, facing that post. So everybody just get in a line that goes this direction, but just face that post over there. Just get behind the person in front of you. You're making single file, okay? And for those of you who are on camera, I'm sorry, you're going to miss this amazing fun. Actually, you'll see the front of it. So we all going to fit right here in this spot? If not, I need everybody to kind of pull in. You guys are really close. That's great. Maybe everybody here take a little. Okay, perfect. So here's what's going to happen. I know you all have heard the game telephone. We're going to do a visual version of the game telephone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the back of the line, and I'm going to tap the person on the back shoulder. They're going to turn and look at me. I'm going to do an action. I'm going to want that person to turn around and tap the person on there in front of them. They turn around, and they get the action demonstrated to them, and then they have to do the same thing. Just keep tapping on the person in front of you and pass the action forward. That's all you got to do. Sound simple? It is simple. Don't turn around until someone taps you on the shoulder, though. Otherwise, you're cheating. Okay? All right, so I'm going to go back here and start this whole thing.
That's the trust fall. That's the action.
Don't look. If you hear laughter, I promise no one's mocking you. It is actually going to get funny. I can already tell it's going to get funny. Nope, don't do it again. That's it. That's all you get. Go ahead. Pass it forward. It's coming. You guys are only a few people away.
Terrifying.
No, it's okay. I promise you, they're not going to have you do something silly. It's only silly in the context of the first thing I did.
Yeah, seriously. It's stressing out over here.
No, It's fine. You're three people
You can
away.
only represent what's given to you.
That's right. And that is actually one of the lessons of this. Okay, you're the last one. Okay, try that. All right, everybody. So here was the original movement, okay? The only person who saw this was the person in the back. I'm going to do it for all of you right now. Here it was, okay? That was it. You were literally, when I started this, you were riding a motorcycle.
Yeah.
And when we got to the end, you guys were flying chickmunks or something. I have no idea what happened over here. But, okay, so go ahead and have a seat. Go back to your pizza. Please watch your step here with the cords. Okay. Now, why do I show you this game of telephone? Okay. Because what we just introduced is the idea that human beings introduce their own filters into everything we get, right? You get something from somebody, when you need to pass it on to somebody else, you create your own filter. You add your own drama, you add your own motives, you add your own story, your own history, what you saw, you might not have been paying attention good enough, whatever it was, right? You pass that on. And the next person thinks that what you passed on was the thing. They don't know that it wasn't the thing, okay? So, who's heard of Waterfall as a way of building something? Waterfall, okay? This gentleman right here, his name is Winston Royce. He is the originator of the term waterfall. This is a shot of his original white paper when he introduced the term waterfall. He was essentially just describing this idea that we could make system requirements happen up here, and then we could get software requirements, and then we could do some analysis, and then we could do program design, then we could actually build the thing, and then we could do testing and then operate it, right? That was his original idea. Now, in the context of telephone, this is me riding a motorcycle, and this is you guys as flying squirrels, okay? And so you can imagine, right, months would happen. Months would go by here before we were at this stage and before somebody could actually see what they were building, okay? And then that would require a change, you know. Usually there was a formal process for a change. And then we would have to go all the way back up to the top to talk to the customer because the customer's up here and the person building it is way down there. Make sense? Now here's the part that's interesting. Everybody missed the caption at the bottom of this white paper. And here it is. I believe in this concept, but the implementation described above is risky and invites failure. Winston Royce wrote that about his own concept in 1970. In other words, he was saying, it's cool in concept, and I kind of believe in the concept, but it's pretty risky, right? And what happened, of course, is history. United States military thought, oh my God, pretty picture. It's a cool diagram. We like it. We're going to build software this way. And then other governments were like, wow, the US government's doing this. Must be the most amazing thing ever. And now you have 35 years of software development going this direction, when actually software was never really meant to go this way. Now, you might be asking, and by the way, I'm not going to pick on Waterfall. I actually do think Waterfall has a purpose, and we'll get to that. But how would you choose? How would you choose which model you were going to use? Waterfall, Agile, right? Agile would be more of a quicker turn around thing, right? We're not going to play this game of telephone. We're actually going to compress that down into a very short time window, okay? So that if we'll never get too far along before we can change our course. That's what Agile's trying to do. So why would we use those two? Well, this is a model called the Kinetic Model, okay? And Kinetic basically breaks all things in the world into these four, actually there's five, we'll talk about the fifth one, categories. Obvious, where cause and effect are directly related. You can just see it immediately. If I touch a hot stove, I'm burning. It's cause and effect. It's immediate, okay? And it becomes something that's kind of autopilot. Complicated, which would be more like there is a correlation between cause and effect, but it's not obvious at first, and we have to do a lot of work to figure it out. And experts could disagree about ways to do it, but it's still somewhat a predictable thing, okay? Like getting somebody to the moon. is a good example of that, right? A lot of science involved in it, but once you understand the science, it's stringing all those things together to make that happen, okay? Complex is where there is no immediate relationship between cause and effect. We can't see the relationship. Is anyone here aware of set theory or heard that term, set theory? It just basically, in a nutshell, I'll just try to summarize it the way that it's been summarized for me, because I'm not a math major. It basically works out like this. I'm facing some choices. I can see 3 choices, let's say. I choose one, and then I can see others appear. I couldn't see those from where I was. So now I make another choice, and then I can see others appear, right? I'm essentially moving through a set, and I'm learning as I go, okay? That is really what complex, that's what he's trying to say with complex. We can't be standing at the first part and see the end. We can only see the choices we have immediately in front of us, okay? And then the last one is chaotic, where there's absolutely no relationship to cause and effect. And I want you to notice here that he's divided this up into unpredictable on this side and predictable on the right side. Okay? Now there is another one which we're not going to spend a lot of time on, but the most dangerous place to be is actually not chaos. It's actually disorder. It's the one in the middle. Because disorder is where we don't know where we are. Right? We don't know which of the 4 we're in. See, because if it's chaotic, I know what to do. I know I can do something. Right? I don't know if it's going to do anything, but I know I can do something. If we heard a loud bang outside, for example, we would all be in disorder because we wouldn't know what that was. We'd all just be staring at each other for a minute like, was that a gunshot? Was that somebody dropping a pallet off a forklift? Was it a car accident? Like the sound, we're going to be matching the sound to patterns. And when we're in that space, we're in disorder. And because of that, we're all sitting here not doing anything, when if we actually knew it was a gunshot, we would know what to do, right? It would still be chaotic, but we would know what to do, right? Run. Okay, so I'm going to give you some domain examples for these 4 just so you can really hammer the point home. Walking and jogging would be something I would consider to be obvious, right? One foot in front of the other. I don't know why they made a magazine out of jogging, but they did. One foot in front of the other, okay? The complicated version of that would be like running a marathon, right? Here is like experts disagree about the way to win a marathon. There isn't one single way to win one. It is formulaic in the sense that we have to have, you have to be in a basic level of shape and, you do the basic nutrition things and train. But if you talk to marathon runners, they'll tell you they all have different ways of winning, all different tactics that work for their bodies, okay? Complex would be something like hunting, right? I can't sit in my truck in the middle of the forest and tell you when I'm going to have a deer. There's no amount of whiteboarding, diagramming that I could do to give you that date. Like, oh yeah, I'll have the deer in 4 hours and 27 minutes. Like, you just don't know. The only thing you can do is get out of the truck and start moving in a direction. And when you start seeing signs that there might have been a deer, and I won't be too graphic, but there are signs you could see on the ground that might be indicating that you're in the right path or you're going the right direction. If you never see those signs, you might know you're going in the wrong direction, but at least you're learning as you go, right? And this is what we would think of as complex, okay? And then chaotic would be something like the zombie apocalypse, right? The cause and effect is not really evident to us, and we know we need to do something, which is run, right? Now here's the interesting thing. I use the zombie apocalypse for a reason. Think of it like, I don't know how many of you watch zombie movies, but they all seem to go through this same pattern. They all start out with, what the hell's going on? To, okay, I don't know, let's try something, let's hit him in the head. To, oh, I get it, every time we hit them in the head or take their head off, they die. To, not even looking and they're getting shot in the head and running, like, it's just, they're moving themselves through the Kinetic Model with a plot. Okay? In fact, a lot of plots do that. So does that make sense? So when you're in this space, this is when you choose Agile. When you're in either of those, you can choose Waterfall. Okay? Because Agile is about experimentation. We're saying the only way out of this is to experiment. If the only way out of it is to plan more, then you're in Waterfall territory. So as an example, I would never want to stand in a building that was built with Agile. Or on a bridge, drive across a bridge that was built with Agile. No, I want those people sitting and thinking about every girder, the load of everything, the science behind it. I want them, it's complicated. I want them to actually do the planning, right? there's not much left to the imagination when you're building a bridge. It sounds like it's a maybe to us because we don't do that work. But if you were an engineer, if you were a civil engineer, it isn't really that complicated. It's not that complex. It's very complicated, right? It's just a lot of things that come to play, but it's all math and science. Okay? All right. So that's when you use it. Now, this is called the iron triangle of project management. Has anybody seen this before? There's basically 3 facets to every project, right? There's a date that you need something, there's what you need, and there's the people or the resources that you have to deliver that thing. Those are pretty much the 3 levers you have to pull when you're working on a project, okay? Now, the problem is, in most of the places in the world, all 3 of these things get locked all the time, right? So they'll say, I need this giant thing, and I need it by this date, and I'm sorry, but I can't get any more people for your team. This is all you got. You got to make it work, right? Well, if we lock all 3 of those things, what's something that's not up here that will definitely be affected? It's not, the word's not up here yet. What do you think would happen if we locked all 3 of those things?
Cost.
Time? No, that's date.
Oh, sorry.
Cost.
Cost is resources, people, and things.
Quality.
Quality. That's it. Everybody cuts corners on quality as soon as you lock all 3 of those things. Oh my God, you need this right now? Well, then I'm not writing any unit tests. I'm not going to do any regression testing at the end. We're just going to get it out the door. You need this. We've got to figure out where we're going to cut corners. And I can't cut corners in what you want. I can only cut corners in how quality it is. It's really the only choice we have when you lock all 3. Now, sometimes you'll hear, oh, we can get you more people if you're running behind. Well, that's great, but it doesn't work, at least not in the short term, right? There's a book called The Mythical Man Month, which is a pretty old book, but it's actually really relevant still. And one of the slogans in that book is, if you want to make a project late, add more people to it. Or if you want to make it later, add more people to it. I think I'm screwing it up. If you add people to a project that's late, you'll make it later. That's what it is, okay? All right, so what Agile wants to do is teach people to unlock scope. It's okay that you can lock your date. At Nike, we can't say, oh, hey guys, you mind moving the Super Bowl out a few weeks? We're not ready with our ad campaign yet. It doesn't work that way, right? The date is fixed. We can't do anything about that date, okay? And oftentimes the teams are fixed as well, okay? So what we're trying to teach Nike and other companies is, how do I view the what we're delivering part as unlocked, right? I've got this thing I definitely need. We'll call that the MVP, the minimum viable product. I need to have that out by this date. But if that's all you got, it would be viable, okay? What we really want is that plus this plus this plus this. At least start thinking of the value in iterations, right? So we can deliver you the MVP and then iterate towards more than the MVP. Are you guys with me? Okay. So when you lock all 3, this is what happens.
So you're cutting the timeline in half? Well, I guess the team can't possibly hate you any more than they already do, so that's a plus. Obviously, you don't care about my team. Obviously, you don't care about quality. I hate quality. I think it's stupid. Only a moron could hit this in this time frame. Maybe you could do it. This must be your first time running a project. Ooh, towards the dwarves. I have pictures of my family, so why would I need to ever go home? I get it. You think I'm a magician. But you don't, this isn't...
Yeah, these are from the folks that wrote the book Crucial Conversations. And this is one of their ads for, if you have these kinds of conversations and you need to have them well, then you should read that book. There, I just gave that promo, and now I can use that video. Okay. So we have a lot of misconceptions about Agile. I'm gonna hit a few of them off right now. One of them is Agile's about going fast, or it's about being adaptable. And I put abusable because the way that usually goes is the company will say something like, your boss will walk up to you and say, hey, I'm sorry we've had to change the idea of what you're building 27 times, and we've moved the date forward, and we've taken 3 people off your team, but you can handle it, right? Because you're Agile. That's not what Agile means. It doesn't mean abuse people and be abusable, okay? This is what speed looks like without adaptability. all right? And then this is what adaptability looks like without speed. But this is what they look like together. And I love this picture of the cheetah because you can see the cheetah's running in one direction, very committed, but also open to going to another direction. See that? Full speed, but also head turned. I'm keeping my eye open, okay? And we're going to come back to that cheetah in a minute. So Agile is not just a process, okay? When you hear somebody say, oh, we're doing Agile, that's already a contradiction in terms. You don't do Agile. You be Agile. And I know I'm going to sound like I drank a bunch of Kool-Aid and I'm up here like, you know, we're in the Scientology building. I just realized that. They're over there somewhere, aren't they? It's not that, I promise, okay? The Agile mindset is more around how you think about work, okay? That's what we call the right brain side. It's how you think about the work and how you think about people and how you think about deadlines and so on. All those beliefs and principles you have, okay? The left side is the doing part. That would be things like Scrum, Kanban, Lean. You hear those terms. That's something doing something that actually lives up to that mindset. So if you think it and you're doing it, then you're being it. Does that make sense? So a lot of times people hire coaches like me, and we get brought into an organization, and we're told, "Hey, just get everybody doing Scrum here." What, you want me to put all the meetings on the calendar? Like, that's not going to make them agile. That's just going to make them follow a process that they won't understand. Okay? So we spend a lot of time. In fact, I teach a class at Nike called the Kickstart, which is a full-day class, and in that whole class, we do not talk about Scrum until the very, 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 very end. We only talk about mindset throughout the whole day. And I'm giving you just pieces of that class right now, okay? So your mindset's how you think about acting. If I give you a situation, the way you act in that situation is a direct offshoot of your mindset. So I put it this way just to be dramatic. Serial killers are doing what makes sense to them, okay? We don't do things that don't make sense to us as individuals. When we do, we're not even thinking about it. We do something, and it's an autopilot response that lines up with what we find valuable, what we have a principle about, okay, and what we believe. Those three things. So we don't go in and try to change behavior. We go in and try to change values, principles, and beliefs. Because if we do that, there'll be like a muscle memory thing that's created where you'll just start doing the thing that we want. Gil Broza, the one who wrote this quote, and this is a book that's in the reading list, by the way, The Agile Mindset. He says in this book that if we had the Agile mindset, but we didn't have something like Scrum, we'd have to invent Scrum to bring it to life. If you just have a mindset, but you don't do anything with it, it's just in your head, right? The only thing that brings it out are the processes and the rules and the behaviors that actually line that mindset up, okay? So the good news is you don't need to change your religion to do Agile. You don't have to change any personal beliefs to do Agile. What you have to change is maybe some of your professional beliefs, right? Maybe you're coming in with the idea that teams only work hard when they're given a deadline. That's a belief. If you have that belief, that belief's not compatible with Agile, by the way. But if you believe that, then you're going to do a whole bunch of things that your team is going to find very disempowering, right? So you see how that belief led to that behavior. That's what we're trying to say. We want to change the belief, not the behavior. You'll change the behavior when we change the belief. Okay? All right, so what are Agile's values and principles? Well, I like to tie these together. If you go to agilemanifesto.org, you can read the Agile Manifesto, which is 4 lines that I call Agile's values. And the way you know you're talking about a value is you see the word over or more than, right? I value this more than that. I've just told you one of my values, right, if I say it that way. So these are Agile's values, and then if you look at that website, there's a link at the bottom that says, these are based upon Agile software development principles. Yeah. It's agilemanifesto.org. .org, yeah. It's at the bottom of this slide, and I will give you guys these slides, or I'll give them to you, and then you can tell me how to get them to people if you want them. Or people can email me, and I'll send them out. agilemanifesto.org, okay? And at the bottom of that page, there's a link that says, something like these are built with Agile software development principles. If you click the word principles, you'll end up with these things that are going to start appearing below here. So they believe that you should build projects around motivated individuals, give them the environment and support they need, and trust them to get the job done. In other words, get the hell out of their way. Tell them what you need and get out of their way. They will do the job. Okay? This is a principle of Agile that lines up with their value of individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Okay? You guys with me? We're going to follow that process a couple more times. At regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective and then tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. So at some regular interval, we stop, we look, how did we do? How did we do this? What was the outcome? Was it what we wanted? What went wrong? What can we change? How can we improve? There's a belief that you can always do it better. Okay? The most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is a face-to-face conversation. We just believe you should be talking to people, and not sending them emails, and not slacking them, and not, if you can, the preferred method is a face-to-face conversation. Something like 80% of statistics are made up, including the one I just made up. 60% of communication is nonverbal. Okay? So when you're just sending a Slack message, you're sending 40% of what your real message is.
What about video and stuff like that?
That's better.
Okay.
Yep. If I had to prioritize it, I would say, face-to-face, and then a video call, and then an audio call, and then an email, or maybe no, then a Slack, and then an email. Like, you guys get the idea. We're kind of working down from most information available to the person you're talking to, least available information you're talking to. Okay? All right. Agile processes promote sustainable development. We call this the no death march rule. This is basically just saying that whatever pace you're working at, and you didn't hear me say 40 hours, right? I didn't say 40 hours a week. I just said whatever pace you're working at should be a pace that your team can maintain indefinitely. So if all of you are single with no kids and no pets, and you can work 60-hour weeks, and you love it, then do that. Nobody's telling you not to do that, but just make sure it can be the thing you can maintain indefinitely. Okay? All right, so the last one here is the best architecture requirements and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. We just believe that if you tell teams what the outcome you want is, and then you get out of their way, they'll build the best architecture, versus getting in there and trying to tell them how to architect it also. Okay? All right. They value working software over comprehensive documentation. We're just saying, as an example, working software is the primary measure of progress, not I wrote 47 lines of code today. Congratulations. Is it working? No. Then we haven't made any progress. If you've worked on this for 6 months and we don't have working software, then you have no progress to show in Agile's world. Okay? And working software doesn't mean finished software. Didn't say that. It just says working. So you could be iterating towards the finish line. You have a new feature up. Oh, this button now does something. It didn't do it before. I'm not saying it's even in somebody's hands yet. It could actually be being built in your own environment and not rolled out to the public. But the thing is, you've got to be merging with main on a regular basis and not breaking the code. And if you're doing that, you're adding value, even if it's not on, even if the feature's toggled off. Okay? All right. The highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous development of valuable software. This is just saying it's our highest priority and make sure they're getting value as fast as they can. Okay? We're not going to go into a cave and disappear and then 6 months later pop out and go, here it is. That's not our way. Our way is, here's a button. Here's another button. Here's a new feature. Right? And they're working with it and they're using it and they're giving you feedback and you're listening to them. Okay? Continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility. Anybody have an idea why that would be? Why would it matter to agility that we pay attention to good technical design and technical excellence? Yeah.
Because it has to do with fluidity.
Yeah. Say more about that. Why? What about fluidity?
Because if you do something right the first time, you're going to have to do it again.
Okay.
So if you pay attention to those little details, even though that might be 5 to 10 minutes, but that can save you 30 minutes of rewriting a freaking program.
Which is what? Because you're making my point for me. What are you getting out of that? Speed, right?
Speed, yeah.
So ultimately, what we're after here is speed, the ability to continue to adapt the code you wrote, because you wrote it for what you needed it to do today. But the idea behind Agile is you're going to need it to do something else later. And what you don't want to do is keep building this giant gargantuan house of spaghetti that you understood at the time you added that feature, but now all of a sudden it's like, what do I have to do? The smallest change on this tool can take 2 weeks now, because we had teams at Nike in the old code where before we converted all of our stuff over to the cloud, where like the code was so brittle that if the payment team made one tiny change to the code, they would have to do 2 weeks of regression testing because the stakes were so high about making sure that's impeding agility. Does that make sense? And it's because they kept putting off tech debt and not taking care of it. Okay. All right. They also value customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So what they mean by that is collaborative iterative development versus that cave thing I talked about. Okay? So principles for that. Business people and developers work daily together throughout the project. Remember the waterfall thing? And I said the customer was up here and the developer's way down here? We want those two people sitting together. Okay? And that's what this is saying. We want people who know what to build and the people who know how to build it to sit together and work together. Some of this stuff just seems so novel and obvious, and you'd be surprised at how hard it is for companies to pull this off. Deliver working software frequently, from a couple of weeks to a couple of months, with the preference to a shorter time scale. We want that because the faster we can get this delivered to somebody who can tell us how they like it, the faster we can get it right. Right? We don't make the assumption that we know it's right, even if they told us. This is, by the way, a real common thing. Here's what I need, and they give you the spec doc that's like 300 pages long with the hex codes of the colors in it and everything, and you're just like, okay. And you build exactly what they asked you for. And then you give it to them and they go, ooh, I thought that's what I wanted. But now that I'm seeing it, it's actually not what can we make this sweet? So we just don't even assume that you're going to be right in the beginning. We just assume you're going to be wrong. And that we need to get something in front of you to look at it so that we can start tweaking it. Okay? We just consider it to be a continuous thing. All right, and the last one they have is responding to change over following a plan. We welcome changing requirements. We actually do. We're not going, oh, another change? We're like, yay, good. We're getting closer to what you really wanted, right? The only time we go, another change is when you gave us a fixed date and we're not moving that date, and you keep moving the goalposts, right? That's why we don't want that to happen. So we're saying we're gonna lock in on that MVP. We're gonna build it. Then you're going to tell us that version 1 that you thought you were going to build is something else. That's okay. That kind of a change is okay because we met our MVP, right? And what we're building might have been this wonderful roadmap that all just went to hell because the first customer saw it and didn't like it. That's okay. That's what we're saying. That's okay. All right? And then simplicity, and this is one of my favorite ones, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done is essential. I call this the lazy person's principle. It's basically saying, like, how do I make sure, and it's written this way, funny like this, on purpose. Because what they're saying is it's an active effort to find what not to build. Okay? And by the way, I'm picking on lazy people, but lazy people are actually not very lazy. If you think about it, they're actually actively looking for ways to not do things. It's a very active activity. If you view it that way, okay? Right. So go try that one back at home. See how it works. All right. So we've got, this is just a summary of those values, okay? And the thing that I want to point out here is the sentence at the bottom. It's just saying there is value to those things on the right. They're not saying there's a value to those things. It's just that if we're ever faced with a choice between this thing and this thing, our autopilot has us go to the left. We will not create a process before we will just increase the ability for people to talk to each other if that was the problem. Does that make sense? Just as one example. Okay. So that's the being. Let's talk about the doing. I've been impressed with the urgency of doing. Knowing is not enough. We must apply. Being willing is not enough. We must do. Right? This is what we're saying here. You can't just be willing. You got to go do it. All right? All right. So we're going to go back to that cheetah for a minute. So there's the cheetah. Let's pretend that orange dot is a deer that I wasn't too lazy to find a picture for. Okay? And actually, my partner is a biologist at Portland State, and he's a PhD student there, and I gave him this presentation, and he said to me, Sean, they don't eat deer, they eat gazelle. I'm like, got it. It's a gazelle that I wasn't too lazy to find a picture for. So that cheetah wants to eat that gazelle, and it's going to make a plan. Okay? I'm going to run over to get the gazelle. That's my plan. Now, what is going to happen the minute the cheetah starts to run towards the gazelle? The gazelle's going to run, right? Now, we could follow the plan, right? If we follow the plan, we are going to be hungry, right? So instead, what we do is respond to change. And that's what we mean by respond to change. We value responding to change over following a plan. Waterfall people often get stuck in following the plan, okay? And again, I know I sound like I'm bashing Waterfall, but there is a place for it. It's just not in this work. That's all I'm saying, okay? Now, in Scrum, we do this responding to change thing in intervals we call sprints, okay? Every sprint, we stop, we look, where's the gazelle? Oh, we're moving over here. And then we run for 2 weeks, usually 2 weeks, but it can be other time frames. And we get to the next spot, we pop our head up, where's the gazelle? That's what Scrum is doing. Scrum is just saying we don't pretend to know where the gazelle is going to be. We just pretend to know where we know which direction we need to run right now based on where it is. Okay? And here's the wonderful thing about doing this, popping up every 2 weeks and looking. Every once in a while, another gazelle pops onto the field and you get to eat. See, because it wasn't about eating that gazelle. It was about eating. So this is another principle that Agile's really big on. It's about identifying the outcome you wanted, not the thing you wanted, right? So when I'm writing a story in Scrum, I'm not writing, I need a blue ceramic coffee mug that is 37 centimeters thick with blah, blah, blah. That's not a story. A story is, I need a way so I'm not burning my hand when I'm holding hot liquid. And then you get out of the developer's way so they can make you something you never even thought of, instead of telling them what to build you. Okay? All right. So we're going to walk through that idea of that coffee mug right now. This is Scrum in a very, very quick way. Okay, we're going to go through a quick sprint together. Somebody's got an idea. They're tired of burning their hand. Okay? They tell the product owner, this is what we call the product owner, it's the person whose job it is to interface with the customer. We say to them, hey, Mr. Customer, Mrs. Customer, you're tired of burning your hand. Great. Let me get what that is. So they write up a story. We put question mark because we're not sure if it's something we call an epic, which is bigger than a story. We just don't know. Right now, we're collecting from the customer what they want, and for all we know, it could be something that our team could make in a week. We don't know. So it's a story at this point. And the story basically just says, as a coffee drinker, this is going to sound ridiculous, I know. We've had coffee mugs for a long time, but just bear with me, okay? As a coffee drinker, I need some way so that I'm not burning my hand. I need a way to hold hot liquid so that I'm not burning my hand. That's a very specific formula. As a who, I need a what, so that why. That's it, okay? Now we can put some acceptance criteria in there, like maybe it's got to keep the liquid warm for 5 minutes, like something like that. You can put some specifications in there, but you just don't want this to be a giant thing. It's supposed to be just a prompt for a conversation between you and the people who are building it. Okay, so there's something called the definition of ready, which the teams make between them and their product owner. That says, hey, when this story is written to our liking, following this formula, we will take it in and look at it. Until it meets that, we won't. So in other words, you can't bring me something fuzzy. You can't be like, I don't know, I ran into somebody in the hall and they said they burned their hands. Can we help fix that? That's not specific enough, right? So that wouldn't meet the definition of ready. Does that make sense? That's what the definition of ready is, okay? So then let's assume it met that, and we go into this process that we call backlog refinement, where the people who are building that thing come together and they look at that story and they say, oh boy, that's not a story. That's 3 stories. So now we know it wasn't a story, it was an epic, right? The epic is this thing with the coffee where we think to hold the coffee, but there's 3 stories, okay? And those stories look like this. So this is the epic, the finished thing. I mean, I'm drawing it as a coffee mug, but let's just say this is what the team came up with, okay? And they think that the first story is to make the handle, and the next story is to make this cup here, and the next story is to make a saucer. They think those are the 3 stories, okay? So they size those 3 stories using this thing we call relational, basically it's relational story sizing. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of this essentially, but it's the 5, the 3, and the 2, they're just meant to be related to each other. A 2 is smaller than a 5. And we use the Fibonacci scale to give us, to represent the fact that the more complex it gets, the harder it is to know exactly how big it is, right? So we just force you into that. It's a 1, a 2, a 3, a 5, an 8, a 13. It starts to go up bigger and bigger in gaps, because when we're getting that big, it's actually starting to get so complicated that the difference between a 7 and an 8 is ridiculous. Make sense? Did you have a question?
Related to story points.
Go ahead.
No,
Oh, that was it?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we got those story points in there. We now know that they mean something to this team. They don't mean anything outside of this team. This team, it just means that for us, that's a 5, and that's a 3, and that's a 2. The only reason that means something to the team is because over time, they establish something we call velocity, which is how many points they get done in a sprint. And we only use that to figure out what they should take in every sprint. We just add the numbers up, okay? So it's meaningless. It's not meant to be an exactament. It's meant to be an estimate. This is a very hard thing to teach engineers, because engineers want to write a formula that makes the sizing happen automatically. I've seen it happen. So you know, the fact is it's meant to be a gut feel. You just have to look at it and be like, well, it's a giraffe. It's clearly bigger than a dog, I hope. Okay? All right. So now we have to decide when. We know what the sizes of those stories are, but we have to decide when. Now let me ask you, if you were looking at these 3 stories and you were that product owner, which one do you think would add the most value to that customer? B, right? Because if I had a handle, that wouldn't, what am I going to do with the handle? Right? It's useful when I have a handle on something. And if I had a saucer, I'm not going to hold very much of the liquid. So clearly the B is the most valuable thing. Okay? So we would identify that as the MVP. And that would mean that the product owner would decide that B needs to happen first. Now, even if the team says they can do B and A, B is always first. Okay? So that they can get that done. All right, so there's our backlog. Stories B, A, and C. And the team does a ceremony they call sprint planning. Okay? Sprint planning is when we go in, we look at the stories that are in our backlog, and we decide which ones we're going to take into our backlog. We only take in, we start at the top, and we go down one at a time until we reach our velocity, and then we cry uncle. That's it. So one of the trick questions in Scrum is, who controls the scope of a sprint? The team or the product owner? The team, exactly. The team, because they get to say, uncle, that's it. Okay? All right, so they decide they can do B and A, and they do their tasking and final commitment. So what that means is this is all happening on one day. Sprint planning, they have it's a very quick meeting. It's like 20, 30 minutes. Then they pull those 2 stories in, and they all disappear as a squad, as a team. And they task out the work. They literally write out all the tasks they think they're going to be necessary. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail on this, but when we were back at that backlog grooming session, this is something that Scrum Masters, which is the person who's actually running the whole thing, okay, they often have to stop teams from doing. Because teams want to do all this design during that moment. Because why? Because they're trying to get a more exact number. They're trying to get an exact estimate. And they think that if they just get in there and start whiteboarding it all, they'll do it, right? Well, there's an Agile principle that we call waiting until the last responsible moment, okay? And that is not the last responsible moment to do that. It's not that there's anything wrong with the planning out how to do the story, but that moment is not the last responsible moment to do that. And I can't tell you the number of times that I've seen a product owner yank a story out of the backlog right before the sprint planning meeting. So if we let the team do all that whiteboarding and figuring out, then they would have wasted all that time because they're not even going to do that story now. Okay? So this is why we make them wait till the last responsible moment. Last responsible moment is this day, the day that they've taken it into their sprint. Okay? So they're going to do all that whiteboarding now. And this is why I try to calm everybody down at the sprint planning meeting, or the backlog refinement meeting. If you decide after you task it out that it's more than you thought it was, right? Say that in the act of actually doing it, you go, ooh, we size this as a 3, but this is way more like a 5 to me after we sized it all out. It could go the other way too, but let's just say, okay, you can change it. You just change it on that day, only on day 1. After that, you're committed, okay? So when I tell people that, they usually go, "Ah, okay, I guess I don't have to like kill the other person across the table because they think it's something that I don't." Right? You get a chance to settle that. All right, and after you've done all that sizing and everything, and you figured out whether or not something needs to come into your backlog or go out of it, then you give your product owner your final commitment. We will get this done in the next 2 weeks, and then they need to get the hell out of your hair, or not, as the case may be. Right? Okay. All right. So then they go off and develop for 2 weeks. It's some interval, right? There are 1 week sprints, 2 week sprints, 3 week sprints. I've never seen a sprint longer than 6 weeks. That would be very long. That's basically simulating waterfall with Agile, so I don't recommend it. The places I see it show up like that, where I think it's okay, are like if you do work for, say, GE Healthcare or something, where you're building medical devices, and the thing that you're building needs to go through FTC approval, or FDA approval. That would be an idea where I might run a long sprint, because the idea is there's just a really long bureaucratic cycle to get your work out. That would make sense, but it's really rare. And a 1 week sprint is also rare, because it's only for really advanced teams. There's a lot of overhead with Scrum. These meetings we're talking about, right? You don't. If you did a 1 week sprint, you'd be having these meetings every week. Now they'd be shorter meetings, that's true, but you don't want that overhead unless your team is just super fast at doing this stuff. And most of the time they're not. Most of the time what I hear, and actually when I got to Nike this was the case, there was some sort of a mandate about like doing 1 week sprints, and we came in there, we're like, no! Who gave this mandate? That's ridiculous. You're just making these teams churn and churn and churn and churn. They're spending all their time in sprint meetings. Okay? So we got them to change that. Actually, the person who made the commandment was like no longer at Nike. Go figure. Okay, so after you're done developing, then you're going to demonstrate it to your product owner. They're going to come in and they're going to put their first cup of coffee in this thing that you just gave them to see if they think it will address the need they got from the customer. And that's your moment. It actually, there's one thing that happens in front of this, which is called the definition of done. And just so I cover it, the definition of done is a thing that you do in addition to the acceptance criteria for the story. So the story said you needed a vessel that can hold hot liquid. You might have a list of things you do to every story, right? Every story that goes through us gets tested by 14 people. Every story that gets through us goes through materials testing. Every story, whatever that is, that's called your definition of done. Whatever that checklist is that you do to every story, that's the definition of done, okay? Then you demo to your product owner. Then, hopefully, you demo to your stakeholder, which is where you pull in real people who drink coffee and you have them come sit down and actually try it. And this is like a focus group, as you might imagine that, right? The product owner is feverishly scribbling everything the person's saying. The finger hole is a little bit small. I can barely get my finger in here. Got to have a bigger handle, right? Like that's what they're doing during this demo. And this is our closed loop of figuring out, did we hit the mark or miss the mark? What's our next iteration going to look like? Oh, it's going to have a bigger handle, right? Okay. And then the team goes off to meet to figure out what they did well and what they didn't do well. Now, this is, when poorly executed, this is a gripe session. Okay? When well executed, this is a real identification of patterns that we keep experiencing on the team and what we can change in our process to make that pattern go away. Okay? And that is the entire Scrum cycle. It's unrealistic for me to tell you to be a Scrum expert in 1 hour, but you now have the basic vocabulary that'll get you through an interview.
Awesome.
This is a good reading list here. I have many more, but these are for this type of audience. This is what I recommend. This one here is actually pretty advanced. So the Ken Rubin book called Essential Scrum. I tell Scrum Masters, if you read this book, you will be a rock star Scrum Master. You'll be ahead of everybody else. This is pretty advanced looking at what I just told you. Okay. Are there questions? Yeah.
With like the Scrum.org, they have like the different certifications for like Scrum Master and Scrum Developer.
Yes.
Do you think those are valuable?
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. How honest do I want to be here? No. Okay. Let me just. I'm going to give you a little tiny brief history here. A whole bunch of people got together, something like 15 years ago, 20 years ago now, and made the Agile Manifesto and the principles you saw. Okay. Those people were all professionals who all went off into their world and wanted to monetize this. There's several camps of those original signatories who have each set up, you could call them friendly competition, a little bit of like, my org versus your org, right? So Jeff Sutherland is one of the signatories, and he's also the designer of Scrum. He has one thing that can certify people, and then I can't even think of the other people. They all have their own certification path. I think they're just letters. I don't think they mean much. And I can tell you, again, I'm not here representing Nike, but I do interview Scrum Masters all the time, and I can tell you, I don't care whether those 3 letters appear on their resume or not. Now, I'm not telling you that other companies won't, but I can tell you that when I'm on your interview panel, I don't care. I actually care more about how you show up. I'll 2 quick examples. I hired a Scrum Master who told me why she was a bad Agile coach. She was asking, she had on her resume that she was an Agile coach, and I said, this is funny, you're an Agile coach at your last job, but now you're applying for a Scrum Master job. Why? Agile coaches usually train Scrum Masters. So it's a step down, if you will, from, and she said, well, can I be vulnerable with you? And I said, yes. And she said, I sucked at the Agile coach job, and I need to take a step back and get underneath somebody who's good at doing it. I'm like, you're hired. You are absolutely hired. Anybody who can tell me what they don't know that clearly is hired. Okay? So, I hope that wasn't a non-answer. I don't think the letters are very valuable, but it depends on where you're going. It's easy to get them, let's put it that way. So go get them. Why not?
It's like $200.
Yeah, it's a money problem. But it's so easy. A lot of them are open book tests. That's why they don't add a lot of value, and that's why those of us in the industry don't put a lot of value on them.
From my view, if I can advocate before doing it.
Yes.
Like hearing you present here again reminds me of what this whole process looks like, and highlights things that I might have lost. So when I did it, the person I thought it was really good, and I used to be a teacher, so I really appreciated what he was showing us.
Yes.
It just helps get the patterns in my brain.
If you're going to classes, yes, I agree with you 100%. If you're just going to take the online test because you read a book, some of them are set up that way.
Yeah.
That's no value at all.
And I'm really not trying to disagree with you, but
No.
offer another perspective.
Yes. No, and I agree with that perspective, actually. I've had very good training through I took the product owner one,
That's what
and I thought it was fantastic. Yeah, it was really cool to see how products are created.
What really, for me, was the teaching thing there.
And it does. Because you can get a teacher, I don't want to brag, but you get a teacher like me who gets this stuff really well, you cut me open and I bleed Agile, right? There's not a question you can ask me that I don't have an answer for, probably. Or I would tell you I don't if I don't. But there are people who are very much like, I know the process of Scrum and I will teach that all day. Well, that is not what people need to learn all day. They need to learn it, but they don't need to learn it all day. Yeah.
Is there breaks between each sprint, or are these is the process kind of back to back to back sprinting?
It's back to back to back.
Okay.
Yep. But it is a little more cyclical than other methods, right? So another one you might have heard is Kanban. I mentioned it in one of my first slides. Kanban is a little bit more, I would think of it as more for reactive work. So like a police dispatching center would have a Kanban board, not a Scrum board. They can't plan out the next 2 weeks of where every police officer is going to be, right? They're just responding to the next emergency. So Kanban would be an example of one where there's just this constant pressure. Go, 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 go. This is number one now. This is number one now. Scrum has this cycle of like, we're building. Okay, let's relax. Let's look back. Let's see what we did right. Let's take a breath. Okay, now we're going to plan. And then we're going to go, 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 go again. So there's a little bit of a cycle to it.
Okay.
It is back to back, but that sprint planning day, I don't expect a single line of code to be written on that day. So it is a little bit of a every 2 weeks.
Well, thank you.
Question?
I've seen in a number of job postings creating roadmaps. I wonder if you have any resource recommendations so I can understand that better.
Yeah, you should read anything from, oh my God, why is his name blocking me? I have the book right now. I literally just got it. Give me a minute. I'll get it before you leave. There is a guy, I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. He's very famous in the Agile community.
I've got another question.
Yeah.
So I also, I interviewed at Nike. It was really cool to be out there. The campus is powerful. But the hiring manager was really specific about the need to really understand Jira.
Okay.
Is that true? Is that, Seems like a lot.
So let me take you back to the individuals' interactions over processes and tools, right? This is an example of them erring on processes and tools instead of individuals' interactions, right?
Yeah.
They don't, in many parts of Nike's product area, they view product as, at least in the Agile world, as a backlog manager, right? And there's so much more to product ownership. There's the whole facing outward. We're getting better. We are hiring really good people who are getting this, and there's whole learning happening inside the company to change this mindset. So that person hasn't been through that training yet. But yeah, I mean,
My sense was it was a mess,
Jira.
the way that they had been using it in that group.
It-
and they wanted
it's-
part me to clean that.
Oh yeah, and I don't think that's your job, but
Doesn't sound like
unfortunately
that
I
much fun
can't.
To some degree, to get you a job.
I mean, if you know Jira really well, certainly it would be the tool you're using at that company to manage the backlog. So you'd want to know how to use it well.
Atlassian has inside of their websites tutorials.
And those are useful. You'll still run into an animal you've never seen before, I guarantee it, but
Sure.
a scary animal. But
As long as it's not hunting me, that's fine.
no, yeah, it's not.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, so you guys can email me if you need to for any reason. The only thing I'm just being honest with you, probably the only thing I won't have much help with is helping you get hired at Nike. I'm just telling you right now, it's a 10,000 person organization just in that one campus. And so when somebody says, "Do you know Mike?" I'm always like, "Yeah, maybe." There's a lot of people there. And I can try. If you guys have something you're going after, you can always ask me. But more often than not, I'm not able to be as helpful as I want to be. But maybe more for the development world than I am for the Agile world. Believe it or not. I know that sounds weird, but I have more connections with engineering there than I probably do with. So if that's your main gig, then you can try it, and I can certainly try it. We have an intern program too that's pretty popular. I think we just went through it, but
To do the intern program, what kind of credentials do you need?
I don't know actually. I know people who just went through it, so I can ask them. But
Do you need like an associate's or what, or can you do
I don't-
boot camps?
actually, let me think. The person I know, I think, has a bachelor's degree in computer science. I don't know if that's a requirement or if that's just what they're recruiting. Like, if they only go to the main universities and recruit people who have bachelors, I don't know. But in the ETW program, which is our temp program, is how a lot of people get in. You get in and you do the work for a while as a contractor, and then they try to just, while you're there, start looking to convert. Well, they don't convert anymore, but looking to find a position that's open while you're there.
With the Agile workshop you do at Nike, is that, that's just for Nike?
Yeah. Yep.
You don't do any public?
Not yet. If I'm still contemplating this. I made this class, so yeah, I own it. I don't know how Nike would feel about me giving the class. There's not a lot of Nike specific information in there, but it's something I've considered doing. Like a weekend, all day thing. Charge for it and see who shows up. It is a very good class. I get a lot of feedback about it. So, other questions? You guys can definitely meet up with me on LinkedIn. That's a great way to get to me. I'm not on Twitter because I like my sanity, but you can get me on LinkedIn is a good way. I'm not super responsive, but I am responsive. So you can always message me. And again, my name was Sean Lemson. I think I'll just put the first slide back on because many of you guys have already gotten this one. You can see how to spell my name. So yeah, if you have any questions that you didn't ask in this setting and you want to ask me in another setting or it comes to you later, it's right there, I think. Oh, it's not there. Sean.Lemson@Nike.com. It's my first and last name at Nike.com. Marty Kagan is the guy I was thinking of. Damn, I knew it would come to me. Jesus. Marty Kagan. He just wrote a book. I think it's called Inspired, is that it? Inspired? That's the one for roadmap building and understanding that product part that the person who interviewed at Nike didn't know. Okay, thanks for your time and your attention.
Awesome. Thank you guys. There's still pizza. Grab a slice on your way out. We do have some surveys over here. If you don't mind taking a minute to just fill it out, let us know what you liked about this or what you would like to see in the future. It's super helpful to us. Otherwise, have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks for coming out.
Yeah,
It's really good.
My pleasure.
Good to meet you.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you as well. That you can hit all the notes you were looking for.
I think it was really good.
Okay, good.
Thank you so much for talking.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Give it to you.
Did you, the more you know about this, the better off you're going to be. Because I guarantee